Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Now today we're going to be doing episode 2 of recent horror watches. Every time I watch 10 horror movies / TV show / documentary, anything horror related, I put it into this video and give my mini thoughts. So episode 1 contained the first 10 that I watched after starting this channel, and this is the next 10 after that. So if you do want to see episode 1, don't forget to check down below in the description and go and watch that video. Now, I do mostly do horror here. I mean, the title can be a little tiny bit misleading at times, but if there's a dark tone thriller or something thrown in, I might just put it in here so I can talk about it. For example, the last video had a Missing in there, the new movie that is all done on the computer screen with webcams and stuff. And even though that isn't fully blown horror, it's kind of a creepy mystery film, so I threw it in there, you know. So it is in what you interpret it to be horror, but if there's enough horror in there, I will throw it in the videos. But mostly all these on this episode are horror movies or horror TV shows, if you like. Now, one movie that isn't going to be in here, and I'm just going to mention it really quickly before we get into the first watch of the video, is Beau is Afraid. Now, I thought I'd give it a mention just because Ari Aster made the best 2 horror movies of the past 5-6 years, in my opinion. I love Midsommar and Hereditary, and they're just, I can't really think which one is better out of them. So I went into Beau is Afraid thinking that there was going to be a few horror elements in there. I suppose there was some moments in the first act that could be interpreted as horror, but overall this felt like a drama movie to me, and one where this guy kind of goes on a sort of adventure, really. I don't think it's a full-blown horror or even half a horror movie, in my opinion, but I thought I'd mention it anyway because Ari Aster did direct them 2 horror movies before it, and people may think this is a horror film, but I'm just quickly gonna say that I was disappointed in this film. It was nowhere near on the level of his last 2 movies, and I just kind of wish he does horror for his next movie now, because that is what he does best. This was one of the worst movies I've seen this year. It had a good first act, and it looked promising, but then it just descended into falling off a cliff, and then eventually falling off that cliff and drowning in the sea below in the 3rd act. Unfortunately, not a great film in my opinion. So I'm not going to mention too much more about that because we are here for the horror watches. So let's just get into it now with the first horror watch of these past 10 horror watches I had. So first up, we do have The Boogeyman. Now, there's a full review on this channel down below if you want to check that out. But this was a new Stephen King adaptation, and I'm always interested in Stephen King adaptations, whether they're new ones or old ones that I haven't seen, or even just rewatching them, because some of Stephen King's movies are some of the best films ever made. The Green Mile, Misery, and I've actually just done a top 10 Stephen King movie adaptations, so if you want to check that out, that'll be down below in the description as well. But The Boogeyman will not be in that top 10. However, it wasn't a bad movie. It just felt a little bit of a generic horror modern movie watch. A lot of horror movies have done this beforehand. I felt like I'd seen this film 100 times, but on the good side of it, it is done better in many ways in this movie, but it also, I've seen it done worse as well. So basically this follows 2 girls who are being terrorized by this entity, and it comes for them at night in the dark, and it feeds off darkness, basically. I won't go into too much detail about this monster after that because I don't want to give anything away if you haven't seen it. It's a fairly new movie, but it just followed a lot of horror tropes. There's a lot of jump scares that you're seeing coming, really, and the movie is very, very dark. Now, I get it, for the horrifying scenes, you want the darkness, and the director actually makes it work to its advantage in these scary scenes. But other times, characters were sitting in the dark when they didn't have to. Like, the young girl has been terrorized throughout this movie. The younger sister, who was a very good actor, by the way, or actress, sorry. She was great in the movie for such a young age. But she's been terrorized throughout this movie by this entity in the darkness when she goes to bed. And later on, it must be like 10 o'clock at night, she's just playing the PlayStation, playing Crash Bandicoot or whatever it was, in pitch black. Now, if you've been terrorized by this thing, why would you be playing the PlayStation in pitch black when you don't have to? Characters don't turn the lights on throughout the movie. Yeah, it's just a very, very dark feel to it. And unfortunately, that kind of took any realism out of it, because characters who have been terrorized just would not be walking around in darkness. But overall, it was an okay watch. I like the way they didn't reveal this monster or entity until the very last moment of the movie. It always kept you intrigued to what it was. Because sometimes when horror films do that, about halfway through, it loses its appeal, really, and you just become accustomed to what we've seen. It's always good to keep the audience guessing, I suppose. But overall, I didn't mind it. It was okay, but not one of the best Stephen King adaptations out there, or even close to it. So that is The Boogeyman. Next up, we have The Black Demon, another film I have reviewed on this channel, and I want to say thank you to Signature Entertainment for sending me a review copy of this. Now, I thought I was really going to get some enjoyment out of this. I hadn't heard the best things going in, but that movie poster, it's a movie about a megalodon shark. You know, it just looked awesome to me, really. It looked like my type of film, no matter how bad it was. And this follows this oil man who's in charge of, I think he's looking after oil rigs or something, and his family, they have to go to Mexico, and he has to check out this abandoned oil rig. And this town where he goes to get to the oil rig, they're all very quiet, very mysterious, because the curse has been set upon their town, and that curse is this megalodon shark that is roaming the waters around the town. And this guy has to go to the oil rig, and him and his family get stuck there with this megalodon shark just battering against this oil rig, and it becomes a bit of an isolation film. And also, time is running out because something on the oil rig is going to destroy it. Also, we do have the megalodon shark battering it. So it's an isolation film where they can't escape, but they're running out of time. And that sounds like a very cool concept. Unfortunately, this film had so many problems going for it. We see the shark about half an hour in, and then we have like 2 more encounters with it. It's not, doesn't really feel like a fully flushed out shark movie. I don't know if they had the budget to keep showing it or whatever, but lots of the dialogue in between is to do with oil industry, oil rigs, and how oil works. And it was just very, very boring. The main actor in this film, I think his name was Josh Lucas, was terrible. He was just being overacting his lines, if you like I'm going to destroy this damn shark. And I couldn't get on board with the guy. Not the greatest effects in the world for the shark, but they were passable, I suppose. And all of Josh Lucas's family, the characters, just weren't interesting at all. I didn't really get behind them, and I didn't really care what happened to them, unfortunately. So one of the weakest films I've seen all year. I don't know how they make a megalodon shark movie boring, but that's what they done here. That is The Black Demon. Next up, we have a British horror movie called Ghost Stories, and this follows this guy who is into investigating paranormal activities and giving explanations to them. So he doesn't actually believe what he's investigating. He thinks there's an answer to everything, and he makes himself feel better by getting to the answer, basically. That's his job. And this guy who he's kind of looked up to all his life says, well, if you think you can get to the bottom of everything, go and investigate these 3 paranormal investigations, because I can't get to the bottom of them. Maybe you can, and if not, maybe you'll start to believe that ghosts are, in fact, real. And it becomes a little bit of an anthology film. And this guy goes and speaks to these 3 people, and it turns into a story. So the first guy he's speaking to at a bar, and it all becomes, I think that was it a mental asylum or something where it was, the first story. And we see a little ghost story about that. The second one was in the woods with this kid who ran over someone, and the third one was something to do with a newborn baby. Now, we do have a good British actors in there, like Martin Freeman. I think the guy is a wonderful actor. Got Paul Whitehouse, who was excellent in the movie. And some of the stories were sort of, you get invested a little bit there, but by the end of each story, I just don't feel like they wrapped up very well. And then it kind of all does come together at the end, but I just didn't care too much. I don't think they're the most interesting stories. Like I said, they all started off a little bit okay, but then because they didn't end well and stuff, I kind of lost interest throughout the film, and I didn't really care when it all come together. So unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy this movie. I thought it was going to be great with British and horror going together. It's kind of like peanut butter and jelly there, isn't it, or whatever. But for me, I was just kind of bored throughout this film. I don't think I'll be revisiting it anytime soon, unfortunately. And it's a shame because I'd heard some good things going into this one. But Martin Freeman couldn't even save it. So, yeah, pretty poor movie. About 4 out of 10 I'd give it if I had to score it. That is Ghost Stories. Next up, we have a documentary, and this was Stephen King on screen. Now, I've been getting into my documentary, my horror docs lately. I've recently just watched Living with Chucky. I'll put that in next in episode 3's video because I have only just watched it after these 10. And I'm thinking about doing a full review for that on the channel, so maybe that will come up soon. And I watched Never Sleep Again not long ago, which I absolutely loved. And I watched Pennywise, the story of it, a few months ago there. So I'm definitely getting into my horror documentaries at the minute. And when Signature Entertainment said, we will send you this, I went, yes, please, thank you very much. And I've done a full review for this one on the channel as well. Now, I was really looking forward to this. Like I said, I'm a Stephen King fan. When I spoke about the Boogeyman, I always interested in his movies. And I was just all over this. The minute I got sent it, I watched it. And unfortunately, this was not on the level of any of the 3 documentaries I've just mentioned, but it was okay. Now, I was always interested in hearing the stories, how Stephen King's movies came about. This is mostly talks to the directors of his films. We get Frank Darabont in there, Mick Garris, who directed the Shining miniseries, and, you know, the director of the latest Carrie film and stuff. Not too many big hitters, but Frank Darabont, I suppose, is a big hitter. We don't get Stephen King in there, unfortunately, but I guess the man is just so busy writing millions of creative stories. But it felt like a bit of a mismatch of Blu-ray extras, if you like. Now, we get like a little segment here of a movie, and we'll speak about a minute or 2 there, and then we'll speak a minute or 2 about Carrie, and then we'll spend 25 minutes on The Shining, and then 25 minutes on The Green Mile, and then we'll go back to 2 minutes of Cujo, and then 5 minutes of something else, and it just didn't feel like it had an end goal. It just felt like a mismatch, and it wasn't thought out properly, in my opinion. I don't know if this was just because all the footage they got, and they had to just put it together somehow, but I like the way some of these other documentaries kind of have certain sections, and here it just didn't feel like that. Like I said, it just felt like a bunch of bonus content put together. It was interesting to hear about The Shining. It was interesting to hear about The Green Mile, but it just didn't feel right because we're hearing 2 minutes of other things here and there. And also, I don't think a lot of this focused on the actual Stephen King creative ideas or how it came about, even though some of it does, because Frank Darabont will go on to speak about Tom Hanks and Michael Clarke Duncan and how they worked together on the film and stuff. It was more like a Green Mile bonus feature instead of anything to do about Stephen King. So I got a kick out of it a little bit. I mean, I found some interesting, facts and stuff, but overall, it just wasn't the best of documentaries. Now, there is a Stephen King documentary out there somewhere ready to be made that is going to be absolutely awesome, and they could make it 4 or 5 hours long like the Never Sleep Again documentary, but this wasn't it, unfortunately. So that is Stephen King on screen. Next up, we have Annabelle Creation. I've been making my way through this Conjuring universe to try and keep up. So when The Nun 2 comes out, I'll be able to do a full ranking video of the whole Conjuring universe. And I enjoyed the first Annabelle. It was actually the first movie I watched in 2023. And now I finally got to Annabelle Creation. Still got Annabelle Comes Home to watch there. I do own the Blu-ray. And this one was a decent movie, I thought. I've heard a lot of people say it's way better than the first, but I did find it on about the same level there. And this follows a nunnery who have to move. Like, the nuns and the children have to move to this other nunnery, and this guy has opened it for them for the goodness of his heart because he's suffered a tragic loss in his life. And he's also the creator of the Annabelle doll. So the doll is in this nunnery, if you like. It's a prequel to a lot of the Conjuring movies, I suppose. And this young girl who we follow, I think she plays the character of Becky in the newest Becky films. And she basically is finding ghastly goings on in this house, as you'd expect. And it does end up being a bit of a generic horror movie that we've seen before. I mean, there's a lot of these that just come out these days, isn't it? But I did actually enjoy it. I liked it going into the creation of the Annabelle doll. It was a good location to have and an interesting concept with the nunnery in this house. And I liked the characters of the young girls. Like, some of them believe this girl, the older ones don't, and think she's being silly and stuff like that. So it was an interesting, decent horror watch, if you like. Demonic possession and paranormal subgenre is not my favourite type of horror movies. I will watch them, but they're not on the level of slashers or anything for me. But this was fine. I didn't mind it. That is Annabelle Creation. Next up, we have She Came From the Woods. Again, I've reviewed this one on the channel in the link down below. Now, this was unfortunately one of the lamest slasher movies I've ever seen. It's a new release, and I thought summer camp slasher set in the 80s, I'm all over it. There's no way I'm not going to enjoy this film because I love the location of summer camps and slashers, The Burning, Friday the 13th. I love all that jazz. And She Came From the Woods just managed to make this genre, the subgenre of this location, boring, I'm afraid. Kind of like the Black Demon made a Megalodon shark. Somehow boring. She Came From the Woods made a summer camp slasher boring. And there's a lot of factors to that. The characters I just didn't care for. I kind of didn't like anyone. William Sadler is in this movie and he produced it. He was okay, but he couldn't save it in the production department. There are some very boring kills going on, but there are one or two moments that were interesting, especially these kids on a school bus just kind of disappearing when the bus driver turned around. But most of the creative kills here were just they couldn't even save the movie, and that should be your strong point in your slasher films. The big reveal at the end had terrible makeup effects, and it really did drag. I think this was like a 1 hour, 14-minute movie, but it just felt like 2.5 hours. I just didn't care halfway through what happened. Felt low budget. I've looked online to see the budget, but I can't find it. But there's nothing wrong with low budget if you can sort of get something there. But it just felt very, very poorly done. Now, there was one redeeming quality to this, and that was the character of Dylan. He was the only character I found interesting or liked because he made me laugh my ass off throughout this movie. He was hilarious, and he just felt like he should have been in a comedy movie. But I couldn't get behind the guy because he was a total arsehole. He was a bully. He was just horrible to everyone. He was a homophobe. He was just not a nice person at all. But he did make me laugh throughout this film, the way he was acting and stuff. But I knew he had to die. When you can't get behind someone who's your favourite character in the film, it says it all, doesn't it? So yeah, unfortunately, this is in my top 5 worst films of the year so far. That is She Came From the Woods. Next up, I watched an A24 film, It Comes at Night. Now, this is one of them films that could be interpreted as horror or misadvertised as horror, if you like, because there is a lot of horror themes in it, but this is definitely more drama-based. But I did put it in here because of this virus that's going on, what it turned people into, and they kind of do look horrific when it happens. And it kind of reminded me of The Last of Us TV show. The world that it was set in felt very much like that. This follows Joel Edgerton and his family who live in this secluded house in the woods, and he's basically just trying to survive. His house is virus proof, and if the virus kind of can't get in, and he sort of locks all his doors and stuff, and he only goes out to find food or stuff or supplies to survive. And when he's out on one of these hunts, this guy, he runs into him and says, "Look, I'm not looking for trouble. I've just come to try and find some supplies for my family." And Joel Edgerton ends up befriending this guy. They come to a certain amount of trust, and in the end, they become really good friends, and they move in with Joel Edgerton's family. So it's 2 families living in the one house to survive together and work together. And you don't quite know which way the movie's going to go. You don't know whether to trust this other family. Is Joel Edgerton and his family to be trusted, even though we've been following them? It just keeps you guessing throughout the movie. Some good acting in this film, some good characters, and it was just a really strong drama / slight horror movie, and kept me guessing towards the end. I wish it would have ended a little bit better, but overall I did enjoy this film. So I do recommend it if you like your sort of character building movies or story building movies, because it is very slow paced, but I wouldn't say the movie drags. It works in its favour. So yeah, it wasn't bad. That is It Comes at Night. Next up, we have a TV show to talk about here, and I was in 2 minds whether to include this, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, this has definitely got to be in there. There was 5 episodes of this, and 4 of them were definitely horror-based, in my opinion, and that is Black Mirror Season 6. I'm a massive fan of this show. I loved virtually all the episodes, even the bad ones, and here was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. So we started off with Joan is Awful, which is basically all about reading the small print and stuff, and it's about this young woman who goes home and she sees this new show on this Netflix type streaming service called Screamberry, and it's Netflix basically taking the piss out of themselves. And she watches this show, and it's basically her whole day, the first episode, what she's just had, and she's been played by Salma Hayek. So she goes to find Salma Hayek, and they both try and get the bottom of what is going on. I won't say too much more than that, but it was a clever episode. I didn't mind it at all. But that was the one that wasn't horror, I suppose. That was more like Black Mirror sci-fi, if you like, drama. I wouldn't say that was a fully horror-based episode. However, the next 4 definitely felt like horror. So the second episode, we have Loch Henry, who sees this young boy and his friend go and film this documentary in the middle of Scotland, in this countryside, and some killings happened there years ago, and he's trying to get to the bottom of it. And what he uncovers is quite surprising to him. Now, I won't speak any more about that because it all is based on the ending and stuff, but I did find this to be a very, very dark episode, and it was okay. It was probably my second least favourite in the series, but it wasn't bad. That's what Black Mirror does. Even the bad episodes have something to say, I suppose. But this one was okay. It was a mediocre episode. The next episode, Beyond the Sea, was definitely the strongest one in this series, and one of the strongest Black Mirror episodes altogether. This was pure sci-fi horror, this one. This follows Aaron Paul and Josh Hartnett, who are these guys who work in space, and they're on a 2-year mission, and they're allowed to sort of go and visit their family whenever they want. They only have to be in space to do the job when it's called upon, and then they go and kind of sit in this chair and transport their bodies down to Earth and go and spend time with their families and live their everyday life. And they only have to go back up there when they need to. Very, very interesting concept. Now, I'm not going to say too much more than that, but something kind of happens and we spiral into a bit of a horrific story, if you like. There's lots of great character interactions here, great performances by Aaron Paul and Josh Hartnett. Aaron Paul is such a good actor. I would love to see him in much more. But by the end of this show, I was just gobsmacked. My mouth was on the floor. My jaw was on the floor, should I say. And it was just a bit of a shocker. But one of the longer episodes, I think it's like 1 hour, 10 minutes. But man, I was just so invested in this. I really did love it. And it felt like, you know, that Black Mirror thrilling twist, if you like. So Beyond the Sea was definitely the strongest in this series for me. Next up, we had Maisie Day, I think it's called. I think that's the name of it. This basically follows this paparazzi group, and this actress hasn't been seen for days. So there's a £30,000 reward to get a photo of her, and this young girl says, yeah, I'll go and find this photo. She's part of the paparazzi, and what she uncovers is something that she wouldn't have dreamed of in a million years about this actress. Now, I'm not going to say too much more than that again. All Black Mirror, a lot of it does base itself around the endings, so it's hard to talk about these shows without going into spoilers, but I'm not going to do that. However, this was the weakest episode, I thought, and thankfully it was the shortest. It's only about 45 minutes long, so you don't have to sit through it too long, but it might be the weakest episode in the whole of Black Mirror, unfortunately. Like I said, this series was a bit of a mixed bag, but I still thought it was okay. And lastly, we do have Demon 79, which was probably my second favourite episode of the show. This follows this sales assistant who works in this shoe store, and she's just very quiet and nervous around people, and she doesn't really say anything to anyone giving her any lip or anything. She just gets on with it. So she finds this artifact in the basement one day, and when she takes it home, this demon pops out and says, you've got to kill 3 people in the next 3 days, otherwise the world's going to end. And she's just like the least likely person to kill anyone, and she has to work with this demon to try and, she doesn't know whether to believe him or to go out and kill these people. And this demon transforms himself into one of her favourite celebrities. Was he off? I forgot the group that he was in, but this character who the demon transforms himself in, it was just a great character. You know, I thought he was so funny, and it was just a really interesting dynamic to see a demon be kind of comedic and be very nice to this woman. And seeing her going about these 3 different nights, going around trying to whether to kill people or not, was such an interesting concept. And I've heard a lot of people say they didn't like the ending of this one, but I actually did. So that was Black Mirror Season 6. If you've never seen this show, I definitely recommend it. It's a great anthology series. And if you like your horror, sci-fi, there's a lot to like in there. So a lot of thrilling episodes as well. It's mainly a thriller sci-fi, but this one was definitely the most horror-based series I've seen so far. So that is Black Mirror Season 6. Next up, we do have Insidious: The Last Key. Now, just as I'm filming this, I'm getting ready to go and see Insidious 5 just after I finish this video. So the review for that will either be on the channel now or after this video. So just keep an eye out for that. But I'll also speak about Insidious 5 in my next episode. But on to Insidious 4 now. This is the only one I hadn't seen, and I thought I better watch it before I go and see the 5th one. And this follows Lin Shaye's character, who is an expert in the further and demonic possession and demons, and she can see things that others can't. And this movie basically goes into her childhood. It acts as a prequel, and I thought that was very interesting to see the house she grew up in. You know, when she first started seeing these demons, her awful relationship with her father. I found all that so interesting. Then we fast forward a few years, and Lin Shaye has to go back to the house that she grew up in because the guy who lives there now is just having reportings of demons terrorizing him and stuff, and she goes there to get to the bottom of it, basically. I thought this was okay. You know, definitely started off strong in the first act. The middle ground was a little bit and then the final 20 minutes kind of let the movie down, and there was some silly explanations as to why she had seen these things in her house and stuff, and it just sort of went downhill for me. But overall, I thought it was an okay horror movie, probably on par with the second one, because I think the first and the third especially is a very underrated horror film, but the first one is the best. I really do like the third. 2 and 4 were about on the same level for me. The comedic goings on with the 2 guys who help her out, I forgot their names, I'm really sorry, just didn't work for me at all in this movie. They were trying to be really funny. I didn't laugh once, and they just came across as creepy at times. So, yeah, overall, Insidious 4, it was just all right. Next up, we do have the final watch of this month, and that is Aliens. Now, this may be mistaken from being a horror movie because the first one is definitely more horror sci-fi focused. This one is more sci-fi action focused, but I threw it in there anyway because it gave me a chance to talk about it. And there are plenty of horror elements in the movie, I suppose, especially in the third act when it all, you know, Newt gets kidnapped and stuff by the aliens. This is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. It is in my top 5 movies of all time. It will be very hard to budget, I imagine. This is basically another James Cameron masterclass, a masterpiece, and a perfect example of why he's the sequel king. He took a concept and turned it on its head a little bit there, going into the more action-focused side of the movie. Now, what I love about this film is the characters. I just love all the Marines and how they are all each different, how they big each other up. Vasquez, you know, Hudson, Hicks. They're just all great characters. There's so many great quotes in this movie. And we've got Ripley, of course, who, despite all these Marines just being big butch and hard as nails characters, she comes out on top once again, and she is not to be underestimated. And I definitely think you should watch the director's cut from 1990, I believe. It explores more of the motherhood type of thing because Ripley loses her daughter after this big hypersleep, and then she sort of goes into the mother side of things with Newt and looking after their character. I love that whole character arc for Ellen Ripley in this. And also you've got that badass gun scene with the miniguns and stuff. I just think this sequel is a perfect movie. I just watch it and go, how can you get better than this as the movie goes on? It's perfectly paced for a 2.5-hour movie. It flies by. An amazing third act. And overall, just a brilliant, brilliant sequel to the first movie. So when Fede Alvarez brings his new Alien movie out next year, I may do an Alien franchise review series and rank them all at the end. So look out for that. And I'll talk about Aliens again. But for me, just a fantastic movie. 10 out of 10. And if you haven't guessed it, guys, we are here for my pick of the bunch. And yeah, it's the one I just spoke about. It is Aliens. One of my favourite movies ever. I won't talk about it again. I've just spoke about it, but no prizes for guessing my pick of the bunch. So, yep, it's Aliens. Okay, guys, hope you all enjoyed episode 2 of Recent Horror Watches. I'm about 3 or 4 movies deep into my next episode now, so hopefully that will be coming in the next couple of weeks or something. Look out for my Insidious 5 review and plenty more horror content to come. Don't forget to check the links to the reviews and the Stephen King top 10 down below in the description. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you all on the next video. Take care.